All right, great. So let's start with taking a look at mode. Now, how did people find this particular assessment, challenge? Did anyone if you had to rate this on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of difficulty, would this be like, oh, I could do this in my sleep, or would this be like, oh God, please never again?
I think it was kind of middle of the road.
I was going to say second hardest.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's take a look. So this thing has a few things that it tells us we need to do. We need to break a large problem down into smaller steps using pseudocode, like we've been doing. We need to iterate through data structures and manipulate the content, then determine which data structure, arrays, or hashes to use based on challenge requirements. So I'm going to, I believe I've already forked this. Oh, what happened? There we go. So I'm going to clone it. Navigate into it. And we can see we've got a JavaScript version and a Python version. Does anyone have, I only want to go over this in one language. Does anyone have a preference over which one we go in, do the language we do this in?
JavaScript, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go over the README before we do anything else. So the method calculate mode takes a list of numbers or strings as its input and returns a list of the most frequent values. If there's only one most frequent value, it returns a single element list. And it's got some examples here, but in Python in this case. So calculate mode of a list of 1, 2, 3, and 3 returns 3 because 3 is the most commonly recurring element. And then they do that again for 4.5, 0, and 0, all of these other ones. This one here has 1, 1, 2, and 2. They are both the most frequent, so they both get returned in the list. And since this one doesn't have any one most frequent element, it just returns the list as usual. So we've got a calculate mode file, and we've got calculate mode spec. Before we do anything else, let's configure this so we can actually turn this into a jest file. So what's the first thing we need to do in order to change this from just a regular JavaScript file into a testing file?
Rename it.
Rename it and npm init.
I'm sorry, I heard rename and then one thing else?
npm
init.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm going to rename this to, what do I have to rename it to?
.test.js.
.test.js, yeah?
I haven't quite figured out the regular expression it runs. It's got to be .test. Seems like it's looking for some other patterns, but I can't figure out what all the patterns are. I guess .test is probably just easiest and safest. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for jest in particular, I believe it has to be .test.js, otherwise it doesn't run. And then someone said npm init. So let's make sure I'm in the right folder first.
No, are you? Can you share your screen? Are you going to do that? We got your
I thought I was sharing my screen.
Oh,
It's in Zoom.
Shared in Zoom. Okay, keep going then. If everyone else is good.
I just wanted to say, you can put .spec.js, and it'll still work. It looks for test and spec.
Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you. npm init. All right, it says, it's Julie walk through creating a package.json file. So what's the next thing I need to write? It says package name.
You can just enter through all of this pretty much.
Yep. And so now I've got a package.json here. And then in order to add jest to this, what do I need to add next?
npm install jest.
I do need to npm install jest.
I did find out if you have it installed globally, you can just hand jam the dependencies in your package JSON. You don't have to do the local install.
That's true.
You need to change the value at the test key to be jest.
at the test key. Doesn't look like we have one yet, so we'll have to add one. Oh, wait, no, there it is. All right, so looks like it's taking its time on this one.
While we're waiting, Noah, how much time do you want us to spend? I seem like I was spending a lot of time this weekend checking input values to make sure, you know, they're within range, they're the right types. How defensible? I'm coming from, that's a habit from PHP off the web from a long, long time ago, right? Making sure it's sanitized. I mean, how much time do you want us to spend doing that?
Good question. So that's asking like, okay, do you want to make sure like, okay, if input is a string or if input is a list, do this, etc.
Right, exactly.
I would say right now, I wouldn't spend too much time on that when it comes to the challenges because you've got a lot of challenges to do. It's a good habit to cultivate, however, and it's good to see when you have more time on things like projects, because then you're making sure that your project is protected from breaking from bad input and things like that. When it comes to just these challenges, I think you'll be okay without sanitizing all of your inputs and everything like that.
Thanks.
No problem. Okay, so we've got Jest set up. Let's take a look at the Jest documentation. Oops, didn't want the fail fast version, just Jest.js. Saw something in the chat. I can open it. Yep, so we've done all of this. So now we should be able to, we don't need to look at this anymore. Let's make sure we export this. So I believe it's module.exports equals calculate mode. Is that right? And then up here, we would say import calculate mode. Does that look right to everybody? Doesn't look like it. What am I missing here with my import statement?
I think you need the method or the function you're trying to call. So like from whatever it's called.
So from.
Well, this
No,
is
this
JavaScript.
isn't
Oh
Python.
no, the file.
So what do I actually have to do there?
Const calculate mode equals require. And then a string goes in there. Or I'm sorry, parentheses, and then a string goes in there. I actually don't know if it's required, but we usually put a leading dot slash in the front to tell it it's the current folder.
Yep.
And I don't think a semicolon is required, but I always put them.
Well, okay, it's not breaking yet, so let's assume that's working. So the README has already given us a few examples here for us that we can use to actually, create our tests, right? Calculate mode 1, 2, 3, 3, 3 expects a list that just has 3 in it. So it looks like here, looking at our require thing, this seems like it works pretty well. It looks like it's almost the same, so then we can start creating our tests. And I always like to make sure my tests, that was weird, are descriptively named. So something like returns mode of array with 1 element recurring. I don't know if that's actually a great way of putting it, but it'll do. And then we could say expect. And then we say here should be calculate mode. I'm going to copy this array. And then we could use, should we use .2b or should we find another matcher?
Depends on if you're looking at a string or a literal or a iterable.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Kobe?
Depends on if we're looking at a string or an iterable. Which one
Good
are we
question.
testing?
I
So,
think the baseline you can't compare two arrays. So I imported that one shallow array test or whatever.
Well, you can use two equals to
Yeah.
evaluate iterables, right?
Yeah, two equal will do a deep comparison of arrays.
yeah, that's what it looks like. So let's do it. So that.
Of course, I learned that after I used shallow arrays and did it the other way.
Yep. Now we've got one test here, so let's make a couple more. I always like to make sure my tests are all set up so that way I can just run them as soon as I get my code made. So I don't want to test every one of these cases because essentially they're the same, these are more or less the same thing. But we also want to have one where, for example, like this, where it has two elements that are have the same number of elements in the array. So like returns multiple modes. And we can just do the same thing here. Calculate mode of this dot to equal. This should be 1 and 2. And then one more where it returns all of them if they are all equally recurring. So returns original list if no mode. All right, so we've got 3 tests here. Ideally, I'd like more, but I also want to actually get to the actual coding. But do all these tests look good to everybody?
I see a problem, I think.
Yeah? Well,
your two equals need to be chained to expect and not calculate mode.
So they do. Thanks for pointing that out.
Okay, yeah.
So let's see if we can fix that like so. Yeah, that looks better. So if we were to run, it's npm run test, am I right? Or is it just npm test?
npm test.
You can do both, but
let's see what happens. All these tests should fail. Yep, so expected 1, 2, 3, received undefined. So it looks like our tests are running as we expect them to. They're all failing because we actually haven't had our function return anything yet. So now we can actually start with the pseudocoding. So again, we look at our requirements just to make sure we're going on the right page. Takes a list of number strings as an input, returns a list of the most frequent values. So step 1, write a function to calculate mode that takes list as an input. All right, what next? And these steps can be as small or as big as we want at this point because we're just starting.
So I wanted to get the number of occurrences for each item in the array.
So get number of occurrences of each item in array.
You have to decide how you want to store the occurrences, object or array.
Yep. So how do we want to do that? Do we want to store them in a list or do we want to store them in an object?
Object.
Seems more efficient.
All right. So let's create an object called occurrences. And once we've done so, what are we going to do? So we have an object called occurrences to keep track of these. How do we do that?
I just made an array of the keys and then sorted them in reverse order to get the highest one.
So you made an array of the keys and sorted them in reverse order.
Correct.
Okay, so create array of object key of list the keys in the list, and then sort them in reverse order. So can you elaborate a bit on what you mean by that, Chase?
Yeah, so I mean, I sorted them so that the key with the highest value would be first in the array.
Okay, I guess my question is, how do we know the values yet?
Oh, I'm sorry. So when we got the number of occurrences, that's going to be the value. So if you store the key as the item of the array and then the value is the number of occurrences, you have both of those things in your occurrences object.
Yes. So we in our object, we're going to want every key should be an object in the list. Every value should be the number of occurrences. The question is, how do we get the number of occurrences?
I use the reduce.
All right, yeah, reduce is a very useful method. I'm actually going to delete these steps right now because we haven't gotten to them yet. So every key should be an object in the list. So when you used reduce, how did you use reduce?
Check to see if the key existed yet. If it did exist, increment. If it did not exist, create a new key and set it equal to 1.
Yeah. So like iterate through list if value in list is a key in our object in occurrences, then we can say like occurrences key plus equals 1. And if it's not a value, and if it's not already in it, then we set it equal to 1, yes? So
Check.
occurrences key equals 1. Oh, okay, nothing important. All right, so that will give us the number of all occurrences, and then we can sort them in reverse order. Order and get the top values. Return top values. All right. This looks like a pretty good way of looking at it. So let's get started. We already have our function written. It's called calculate mode. It doesn't take list as an input yet, so let's fix that. So we need to get the number of occurrences for each item in list, and so to do that, we're going to create an object called occurrences. And we need to turn every key in our list, every value in our list should become a key in occurrences. So I could say all right, so let me thinking about that. Should we use a for loop? Should we use a different iterator? I know someone said that they used reduce. What makes most sense here?
I use the for loop.
Equals 0. I is less than list.length. And then we can say something like, excuse me. Sorry, something in the chat. Yeah, reduce is very powerful, but for can be a little more expressive sometimes. So I'm going to stick with that for now. So I'm going to say something like, all right, you should be able to say if list I is a key in occurrences. So how can we, is there a method, how do we check to see if it's already a key in occurrences?
You can just do occurrences at list of I, and that'll be a truthy value.
So if occurrences I, like this?
You'll need list at I.
Ah, yes, thank you. Oh. Like so.
Does in work there?
I'm sorry? Does in work there?
Right.
I'm not sure. It would in Python. I don't know if JavaScript has a if in operator.
They have like a list dot includes method, which is similar, but I think it only works on certain type of structures.
Yeah, we can always look that up if we're always confused. We can say JavaScript object includes key and see what comes up. So JavaScript checked if object contains key, and there's also something here in the Mozilla. So object.keys.
Yeah, that returns an iterator of all your keys.
Which is useful, but not exactly what we want, perhaps. But then we could check if it is in that. But I think we were right in saying that if occurrences list I should return a Boolean, or at least a truthy or non-truthy value. And we can also just check that. Should really just keep this open. So I'm seeing this. Right, so Julian just showed this thing of, so object key equals key1. So so according to this, we should be able to say something like if list I in occurrences. Am I reading that right, Julian?
Yeah, it looks good to me.
Okay, let's try it.
And putting it like that will only check the key, not the key's value.
That's true. But at this point, we don't need to check what the value is. We just need to check if it's already there or not.
I was just asking. I haven't messed with the object stuff yet.
Okay. So yeah, so our goal here isn't to say, we're going through our, going through this array, for example. We're checking, does it already have a key of 1? If it does, then we need to iterate that value that's stored in our object. If it doesn't, then we need to add it there. So I could say, so if it is in occurrences, we'd say occurrences I plus equals 1, because it's already there, so we're going to
List of I.
I'm sorry? Oh yeah, list I. Thank you.
I just wanted to say for in, there's in, and then there's of, and it's a little different for JavaScript. In is like objects and iterables, and then you use of for like strings and things that aren't normally iterable.
Oh, cool. Thank you. So good to know about that, but I think in should work here if I'm reading this correctly. I'm going to set up an else saying, so if it doesn't already exist, we're going to say, okay, now it exists with a value of 1. Occurrences list I equals 1. So let's just run this right now, console.log occurrences, and see what comes up. So I'm going to run calculate mode down here. What the? Okay, that was weird. I'm gonna clear the screen. npm calculate mode.js. Uh-oh, what did I do
On
wrong?
node.
Oh, right, thank you. All right, this looks a lot like our assumed value, right? We have an object. Each of these keys is a value in our array, 1, 2, and 3. And we know there are 2 1s, and here they are. There's 1, 2, and 1, 3. And just to double check, let's try this with different values to make sure it still runs the way we want it to. So like who, what, when. Let's check another who in there. Who, what, when. There's 2 who's, 1 what, and 1 when. All right, that looks good. So now that we've gotten that, our occurrences set up the way we want it to, we need to get all of the values with all of the keys with the highest value. And there could be more than one. So I heard something about sorting in reverse order. So how do we do that? How do we sort an object? Because objects by definition are kind of unsorted.
You use object.keys to make an array of the keys.
All right, so we can say let keys equal occurrences.keys.
It's object.keys, and then you pass occurrences to it.
Ah.
And capital, yeah, there we go, sorry.
Don't we want to sort by the values though?
Yeah, you can do that with dot sort. It's pretty cool.
Okay. Let's take a look at dot sort then.
What I'm wondering is, okay, sorting, what does that get us if there's a tie?
For my particular solution, I just grabbed, once you sort the keys in reverse order, I set a variable called highest occurrence to the first key, and then I just looped over the occurrences object, and I pushed every value that was equal to the highest occurrence into my results.
So I'm looking at the sort things here at W3 Schools, which is one of my favorite websites. So there is a compare function here that talks about how to sort it. So if you want to sort it differently. So this compares 2 different values. So this will return it like that. So I'm a little bit confused. So we have our thing of keys. I'm still a little bit confused on how sort would come into this, because the way I would do it is we have our keys, we can loop over them, and just like you said, add everything with the maximum value once we know what the maximum value is.
Yeah, so I just use sort to determine what the maximum value is.
All right, so let's try this. I'm going to set up a few things. I'm going to make an array called results. And I'm going to make something called max value. I'm going to set that equal to 0. Oh, chat's really blowing up today. I'm just going to go old school on this and make it as verbose as I can. So I'm going to say for key in keys. I'll do something like I'm going to loop through it. I'm going to say, all right, if this key has the max value, add it to results. If not, we have to change max value, clear results, and add the new thing. So it'll be something like this. If occurrences key is greater than max value, then I might say I need to empty results because we have a new max value. So first we'd say max value equals occurrences key. And then I always forget how to empty out a thing. Remember what I said about every developer needs to be able to check the documentation all the time? Or I could just reassign it. What am I talking about? And then results dot push key. So that's if we find a new max value. Then we can say else if it's equal to it, occurrences key equals max value, then I just push it into results. Is this solution making sense to everybody? Is it not making sense at all? Because I want to hear if it isn't. Yeah, so Julian, that's a good point. So we haven't talked about big O yet, but this isn't necessarily the most efficient example. But right now, I just want something that works.
So I believe this is more like an expansive way of, finding the max, but it explains itself. I think it will get to the point.
Yep. And like I said, sometimes during challenges, first you make it work and then you make it pretty. So at the bottom here, we want to make sure we return results. I'm going to block this out, and I'm going to run my test suite instead of just doing runner code. npm test. Uh-oh. We had some failed tests, which is good. So what it says, returns occurrences is not defined here, as it says. Okay, let's see if that says anything else. Oh, I misspelled it. Let's try that again. Oh. I think I misspelled it here too. You'd think my linter would catch that, but no. All right, let's try this one more time. Okay, we had some more failures. All right, so in this case, it means that, so this is good because this in case means we didn't break anything. It just means we didn't get what we expected. So let's take a look at one of these tests, returns mode of array with one element recurring. So it says expected 1, received 2. So, all right, we messed up here somehow. So in that case, we need to figure this out. I want to get a better look at things. So I'm going to console.log results and go back to my runner code. Let's try this with 1, 1, 2, and 3. Just do node calculate mode.js. Okay, so that one worked. Does anyone see an issue looking at this output though?
It's a string.
Yeah, it's a string, and we told our element here to expect an integer. So that's part of it. I don't know if it's everything, but this is something we can definitely fix. So we need to change this from a string to an integer.
It wants out.
I'm sorry?
Never mind. No, never mind. I forgot.
Actually, if you do that, you're going to have a problem with your when you pass in who and when you pass in string array of strings, you're gonna have a problem with that.
That's a good point.
So object.keys, when you pass occurrences to it, is actually converting them all into strings.
That's a good point.
That's kind of the problem.
And you just have to loop over all your keys, and if it's a number, convert it. If it's not, leave it as is.
Let's take a look at something. I want to take a look at I believe it's parse int. Let's see what happens when you use parse int on a string that can't be converted into an integer. So parses a string, returns integer.
Problem is you have keys that could be floats.
Oh yeah.
So I use number.
Number?
Yeah.
Let's take a look at this. So I believe it's this function right here. convert different objects to their values. So converts the object argument to a number that represents the object's value. If it cannot be converted to a legal number, NaN is returned. We don't want any NaN if it can't be turned into a number. So
just preface it with a plus. Try to do a mathematical operation on it. That'll give you Boolean, I believe. Gives you falsy if you can't. That's how I did it anyway.
Preface what with a plus? I'm sorry.
So if you iterate through all your keys and you check to see if plus key is strictly equal to plus key, that's thanks to Google. That was the shortcut that I found, because if you try to convert a string using a number operator, you're going to get not a number. And in JavaScript, not a number is not strictly equal to not a number. I'll put it in the text. It's hard to explain. It's one of these wacky JavaScriptisms.
Yeah. So one thing I am thinking of is I wonder if NaN is truthy or falsy in JavaScript, because I don't actually know. So I'm going to try look that up. Like JavaScript NaN truthy. So let's see here. In JavaScript, truthy value is a value that is considered true when encountered in a Boolean context. All values are truthy unless they are defined as falsy, which includes NaN. So one thing I can think of is, instead of just looping through everything, all we need to do is say, well, I guess we could do that right here and say, like, if number key. Actually, let's not do it there. What is the best place to do this, I wonder? Because we could check if it, like, because if it's not if it doesn't have to be added to our results, then we can just don't have to worry about converting it one way or the other. But I don't want to repeat myself if I don't have to. So I could say something like, let's try this. So if it can be converted into a number, we could say let result to add equal number key, else result to add, let result to add equal key. So then I can replace everything of all of this stuff with just result to add. I think that should work. Let's take a look. Oh, okay. Result to add is not defined. Oh, because we didn't say what result to add was if we didn't. So I might want to say, wait, no, it should still be defined. Interesting.
Is it because you only define it within the if statement?
I believe, well, I could get around that maybe by just saying defining result to add up here.
That might be one way to do it.
So that way I'm not defining it twice. Okay, so that didn't work. Not only did it not convert it into a number, it looks like it gave us the wrong answer this time. All right. This is going to require some more debugging. So I'm going to table this stuff for now, because I want to make sure I'm getting the right results, even if they are strings. Actually, I'm just going to Control Z a bunch of times. Okay. So back to where we started. We're getting 1 this time. We got 2 last time. That's weird. I'm going to run my test suite one more time so I can get a better look of exactly what's happening when it gets sent to the testing suite. It's also showing us my console.logs, which is helpful. All right, so it says here expected 1, received 2. So actually, I'm having a little trouble reading this, if I'm going to be honest, because I'm seeing array 3, 1, 2. And I'm not sure if it's saying it doesn't have this or what. Because we're expecting 3 right here, and I think it's saying we only got 1 and 2. Am I reading that correctly?
What it looks like to me, but I'm not sure either.
Yeah, because
yes, that's correct. If you scroll up, there should be the expected, where you see a green and a red right next to each other, a little higher in your test, right around there. So there's expected and received. So the received will be in reds and the expected.
Yep. So it's interesting is that it gets, so it looks like if we're looking at this particular test, 1, 2, 3, 3, it's not reading 3 as having a greater value than 1 and 2. Question is why? Oh, I think I see it. Does anyone else see it? Wait, no, I don't. Never mind. Thought I did, but then I didn't.
Is your key the number that you're checking, and then you're trying to see the value as the occurrences of the number, right?
Yeah, I believe the key should be every essentially unique list of everything in the list. So we should have 1, 2, and 3 should be object.keys for our occurrences. But let's double check that. Assuming is a great way to make lose everything in this. So console.log key. As we go, clear this out. I'm going to run the runner file again. We have 0, 1, and 2. Ah, that's not what I was expecting. So what happened here?
It looks like you're printing out the index of the array that was returned from when you.
Yep. So what was I pushing into my array instead of the key in my object?
You're pushing in the index as you're looping through versus the value.
Yep.
Be assigned to the key.
So in that case, I'd want to go keys key. And I don't want to do key here. I want to do keys key as well. Well, okay, let's rework this a bit. Let's assign keys key to a variable so that we can just reference it pretty easily. So we could say let object key equal keys key.
Could we just not change the for loop to be a for key of keys instead? Because I think if you use of keyword, it'll iterate over an array.
If you don't say for values.
Yes, key of keys works a lot better, it looks like. Because then we have 1, 2, and 3, which are what we're expecting here. Thank you.
But
So
it's not the key though, right? And that's just semantics, but it's going to make my head hurt. The of loop returns the values, so it's value of keys. Not key of keys.
Well, it looks to me like we're looping through our occurrences, which should just have 1, 2, and 3 as the keys in our object. And that's what we're getting here, 1, 2, and 3. And if I were to change this to, I don't know, bacon, I should expect to see in each key should be 1, bacon, 2, and 3. Or 1, 2, 3, and bacon.
Actually, sorry, I'm not right either. You're getting the indices back with that of loop, right?
When it was 4 key in keys, we were getting, it should have said index, and it should have said 4 index in keys. That would have made more sense, and it would have been less confusing.
Yeah.
But now that it says 4 key of keys, we're actually looping over that line 18 where it says keys equals object.keys. That gave us back an array, and since we're using the of keyword, we're just looping over the values, not the indexes anymore.
Exactly. Thank you. So let's try this again. All right, so in that case, we got the answer we wanted. Let's add a second bacon in here. See, we should get, our results should be 1 and bacon. Great. So we still have the issue of whether or not it's a string. But it's also been about an hour since we've started. So I'm going to try to see what happens when I run the test now. All right, so we can see here our tests are failing because we're getting 1, 2, and 3 instead of 1, 2, and 3, or vice versa, I should say. But it looks like we're most of the way there. So I'm going to think a bit about the best way to make sure an easy way to convert these into numbers if they are numbers. But I would like to take a break right now just so we can, give our brains a break. So let's come back again at, let's say, 9:32. Take a 6-minute break.
Hey Noah, can you post that code in the Slack?
I will.
I want to play with